at the recording of Revenge, was Eric Carr, was he, how do I want to say it? Did you know that he wasn't coming back?
Well,
what was the prognosis at that point?
I was always aware that he was in a lot of danger, you know, because of his health. But Ezrin, you know, I think it wasn't fair. I'm really glad, you know, that they didn't try to torture him and say like, okay, play, even though I know he wanted to. And maybe if that's only going to be 75% of like his real capability if he was completely healthy. So it was kind of unfortunate, but I think that was the right decision. Fortunately, he's on, of course, God Gave Rock and Roll to You. He's singing on that.
And he's in the video.
And he's in the video, and he had more energy than me that day. So he really wanted to be a part of that, and I give him tremendous credit for his you know, that you know, stamina to do that while you're, you know, battling, you know, a disease like cancer. But it wasn't going to be right for him to burden him with such an important record and expect him to play at his best when he's fighting for his life, basically.
Yeah.
You know, and that's no exaggeration.
So he wasn't. He knew he was no longer in Kiss at that point.
At that point,
he knew Eric Singer was in that slot.
Eric would record with the band,
and if by some miracle or miraculous recovery, he would. Then
I would presume that would have happened. There was a lot of stuff going on then that was crazy, and I barely could keep up with a lot of it. But to me, always as his friend, the most concerning thing was his health and whether or not, you know, he could survive something that when I would ask a doctor friend, you know, that's like you know, when they give me the percentage of the people who survive that, it's not something that you feel very, very comfortable knowing,
or positive.
It's very,
about.
very awkward. You know,
it's
horrible.
and you know, this is sad. This is stuff like this is really death is always sad. But I mean, he had cancer. He didn't have a heroin overdose. Nothing crazy like that.
And think about it, for a guy with such a big heart, cancer, the tumor was on his heart.
Yeah.
That's like, it's a very rare form of cancer, too.
And but he does get a little tribute at the end of Revenge album with the
Car Jam.
Car Jam.
And I got to play guitar in that. And that was like immediately after the funeral. And people would ask, well, what did it feel like going back to work? And I was like, I was grateful to get back to work.
To forget about it.
Yeah, exactly. Because all that was just terrible sadness. You know? Very sad.
Well, we don't say it to joke. We actually say it. We say rock in peace. So rock in peace, Eric.
Well, he made his mark, and you know, I'm still close with the family, and they've been very, very, you know, ambitious and creative with keeping his legacy alive. And I've been involved with some things in that regard. Yeah. So sometimes I've had dreams of Eric, and I feel like he's always a part of me and watched over things with me. So it was a wonderful experience, you know, getting to be close and working with him.
Yeah, I always think like if Eric Carr hadn't have passed, would there have been a Kiss reunion tour with Peter and Ace? Because, you know, Eric did wear makeup, so maybe who knows?
What would have happened?
Who knows?
I know.
What can you tell us? Is there anything you can tell us that maybe you've never told anyone about what kind of a guy Eric Carr was?
Well,
a mensch?
Very much so. Actually, I think a mensch is more for the Jewish people.
Yeah, you're right. It is.
But Eric, first of all, he was super talented. I mean, not only as a drummer and a singer, and he could write songs. Did you know he had a co-write on a Bryan Adams album?
Yes, I do, on the Cuts Like a Knife album. Yes, and I just saw Bryan Adams on Friday night. And I remember, because I was always a read the liner notes guy, and I'm like, what? And then you're like, is that the same? Could that be? That's got to be the same Eric Carr. How many Eric Carrs can there be?
It is him.
Pretty cool.
Well, look, think of Bryan Adams co-writing War Machine. How odd is that?
I know. That is insane.
But Eric was very funny. He was extremely kind to the fans. He was wonderful in that way. He would always go out of his way to just be, you know, there for them. He used to write them back, and he'd greet them in the lobby, and it didn't matter if it was, you know, below zero outside in Scandinavia. There he is, you know, talking to fans. He was that kind of a person. Wonderful.